Hey, go! No fair! What the hell is that?
Greetings, Earthlings and interdimensional weirdos alike. Sergeant Grumpy here, reporting for duty on the Cult of UFO channel. Today, we're going to do a theme park, a tour of one of the biggest, strangest, and downright kookiest stories in the UFO world. Get your gear ready, because we're heading straight to Skinwalker Ranch and into the labyrinth of Pentagon funding that connected Senator Harry Reid, billionaire Robert Bigelow, flying saucers, werewolves, and even a dino beaver. Yeah, I said a dino beaver. We'll be exploring all the peculiar threads that knit together the $22 million government contract that alleged UFO investigations, poltergeist activity, and that secluded patch of Utah desert that's become ground zero for the weird and paranormal. Settle in. We have a lot of ground to cover, so if you've got popcorn, you better make it jumbo-sized. If you're new around these parts, welcome. You've probably heard some chatter about the Pentagon's secret UFO programs, ATIP, OSAP, and maybe you've heard the name Skinwalker Ranch thrown around. Perhaps you'll recall that the New York Times bombshell story in 2017 that introduced the world to a Defense Department UFO program. You might even know the cast of characters. We have Harry Reid, former Senate Majority Leader; Robert Bigelow, a Las Vegas real estate mogul, an aerospace entrepreneur and enthusiastic funder of all things paranormal. So how did these two end up with $22 million of government money, and government money means your money, to hunt UFOs, poltergeists, and shape-shifting wolves? Was it all just nepotism? The short answer is, more or less, yeah. According to many researchers who've followed this saga, the more interesting, longer answer though is exactly what we'll sink our teeth into for the rest of this video. Skinwalker Ranch, 512-ish acre property in northeastern Utah, once owned by ranchers Terry and Gwen Sherman, then later by Robert Bigelow, and now by someone else entirely, Brandon Fugel, but we'll go into that in a completely different video. People claim the ranch is a paranormal hotbed. There's stories of UFO encounters, poltergeist activity, cattle mutilations, swirling portals, and all sorts of mind-boggling strangeness. The ranch got its peculiar name from the Navajo legend of the Skinwalkers. These are malevolent shapeshifters said to roam certain desert areas. Some folks call it the strangest place on earth because it features a grab bag of the paranormal. You want orbs of light? Sure. Cattle mutilations? Yeah. Shape-shifting wolves impervious to bullets? Yep. Right here. Interdimensional doorways opening above the ground in broad daylight? Come on down to Skinwalker Ranch. We have it all.
Roll up.
Now, if Skinwalker Ranch is the stage, at least two of our main actors are Harry Reid, the longtime Nevada senator, once the Senate Majority Leader, known for wielding serious political clout, and Robert Bigelow, the billionaire Vegas realtor and the man behind Bigelow Aerospace, a long-time UFO enthusiast and deep pockets that have kept UFO research afloat for decades. They've known each other for years, as Bigelow was a major player in Nevada's business scene. Reid was fascinated by stories of UFOs, and he found Bigelow's quest to investigate them brilliant. That's like a buddy cop movie waiting to happen. The powerful senator, the billionaire truth seeker, plus an old desert ranch rumoured to host an interdimensional rift. I mean, I've heard of bigger boondoggles, but I gotta admit, this one is top shelf entertainment. And then we've got BASS, that's BAASS, OSAP, AAWSAP, and ATIP, AATIP. Is this alphabet soup of real programs? Most of us have heard about the Pentagon's UFO program, thanks in part to that New York Times article by Leslie Kane. They reported on something called ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, led by a guy named Luis Elizondo. And we've already had a video on him. Check the back catalogue if you want to find out how I feel about him. The article claimed this hush-hush program started in 2007 with $22 million in funding thanks to then Senator Harry Reid. But the story's not as simple as that. There was also OSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, and that might actually be the real name behind the so-called Pentagon UFO study that was revealed in the article. According to various documents and investigators like John Greenwald from the Black Vault and Stephen Greenstreet from the New York Post, there's a huge discrepancy. One of the biggest reveals is that OSAP was not strictly about UFOs. It researched all kinds of paranormal phenomena, including werewolves and poltergeists at Skinwalker Ranch. So where did ATIP come from? Some say it was a nickname to deflect away from the fact that OSAP actually wasn't just looking at UFOs. Others say ATIP was more narrowly focused on potential aerospace threats, like strange craft seen by Navy pilots, while the real hush-hush werewolf and ghost program was OSAP. Or ATIP was just a nickname that was used for OSAP because it was shorter and rolled off the tongue better. Are you confused yet? Well, that's exactly how I felt reading about this mess.
Confused?
But in any case, $22 million in Pentagon money found its way into Bigelow's BAASS. That's the Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. And that was to investigate, well, who knows what, at Skinwalker Ranch. And remember, Bigelow owns it by this point. So, the Sherman family who originally owned the ranch, let's go back and find out what happened and how it got into Bigelow. So back in the mid-1990s, Terry and Gwen Sherman purchased the property hoping to raise cattle. They started seeing bizarre lights, hearing disembodied voices, losing valuable livestock to questionable mutilations, and allegedly witnessing bulletproof wolves and actually shooting at one. After about 18 months of terror, they'd had enough. Terry Sherman sold the ranch to Bigelow in 1996. Bigelow's National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS, started investigating the ranch with a full-time team of researchers, no expense spared. They installed cameras, sensors, the whole shebang. But it turned out to be notably difficult to capture good, scientifically verifiable evidence. Still, something about that ranch enthralled Bigelow, so he kept investigating and hooking in bigger names. Then along comes DIA official James Lakatsky, and he'd read the book Hunt for the Skinwalker. He then visited the ranch, felt something otherworldly, and later pitched to Harry Reid on funneling government funds to study it all. So how does a UFO ranch get federal funding to the tune of $22 million? Well, apparently, Lakatsky experiencing something strange at Skinwalker Ranch in the kitchen, I believe, of one of the houses. He then tells Harry Reid he wants to study it. Reid greenlights a classified contract via the defence budget, and the only bidder is Bigelow's Bass. Voila! You've got it, a fully funded paranormal research extravaganza. And we're not talking pocket change. $22 million of taxpayer money over roughly 5 years for all sorts of advanced aerospace weapons systems research, except that it wasn't. That research was poltergeists, orbs, UFOs, wolves and dino beavers at Skinwalker Ranch. Meanwhile, after 2 years, the broader contract was ended. They attempted to secure more funding, it was denied. Hardly surprising when they had nothing to show. But the embers from that funding fiasco never really died out. Several years later, we get the 2017 article in the New York Times, a swirl of hype about secret UFO studies and the cultural movement that made Pentagon UFO program a household phrase. So what about Luis Elizondo and ATIP? So that question comes up a lot. Who is this guy Luis Elizondo? And did he really run a UFO program? Elizondo says yes. The Pentagon says, no he didn't. The Pentagon claims he had no responsibilities with ATIP and it wasn't even officially a UFO program. That contradiction is quite the head scratcher. If you want to find out more, check out my video on Elizondo. Regardless of who's telling the truth, Elizondo became a UFO celebrity overnight, popping up in major news networks, talking about flying saucers, Navy, Tic Tac videos, and the alleged government cover-ups. A simpler explanation? There was a genuine confusion, probably purposeful, between the real name OSAP and the narrower concept of ATIP. We're left with a swirl of contradictory statements, half-baked disclaimers, and people pointing fingers. Again, check out my earlier video about Elizondo if you want to find out how I felt about him and what I think. Meanwhile, Bigelow stays mostly quiet about exactly what went on at his ranch all those years. And those shenanigans include things like portals, werewolves, and dino beavers. These are pretty bizarre claims from the ranch. Some of the reported highlights from Skinwalker Ranch include poltergeist activity, people experiencing doors slamming, objects moving on their own, disembodied voices, shape-shifting wolves, a bulletproof wolf that terrorised livestock, shot multiple times at point-blank range with a high-caliber firearm, and just walks off. Portals, glowing doorways opening in mid-air, mysterious orbs, strange balls of light that zip across the sky, and dino beavers, creatures described as giant beaver-like animals with dinosaur traits. Yep, dino beavers. NIDS researchers claim to be employing science, but apparently didn't manage to produce conclusive proof of any of it.
It's science.
Critics, including many skeptics, say the phenomenon is almost certainly illusory, or the product of tall tales. Still, you gotta admit, if you're gonna film a reality show somewhere, that's a heck of a place to do it. And Skinwalker Ranch has indeed become a fixture of TV series and documentaries. But that's another video altogether. The media had a field day. Between incompetent journalism and the inherent mystique of UFOs, a single reporting misstep can create a tidal wave of sensational headlines. The case in point, the New York Times piece in 2017 sparked widespread coverage of a secret government UFO program. Soon after, stories of weird craft, Navy encounters, and official videos turned mainstream. However, deeper digging by journalists like John Greenwald and outlets like the New York Post, the Black Vault and others, uncovered the contradictory statements, the iffy roles and the possible nepotism behind how Bigelow secured that contract. Even the Pentagon itself clarified that ATIP was not exactly what the initial coverage suggested. It's a cautionary tale. As soon as you say UFO, the media freaks out, and a story can go ballistic. Boom, just like that. A lot of flashy claims from Skinwalker Ranch remain unverified, and many skeptics point out that the previous owners didn't report any supernatural activity for over 60 years. It was only once the Shermans bought it that something seemed to have started happening. And the stories might have just got bigger and bigger, especially once Bigelow got interested and then decided to buy the place. Reid's role has also come under scrutiny. Critics argue that he used his political influence to funnel money to a buddy's fringe fascination. And let's be honest, he probably did. Meanwhile, Supporters, like other UFO believers, say he was a visionary who dared to push boundaries in the name of science and national security. I kind of know where I'm standing at the moment. With a complete lack of any scientific or credible evidence, it's difficult to come down on his side. Regardless though, it did change the conversation around UFOs that led directly to the wave of coverage that eventually forced the Pentagon to admit to investigating unidentified aerial phenomena. And that's culminated in recent congressional hearings. The question of what's out there remains, but we can trace much of the modern UFO mania to those Skinwalker Ranch escapades and the cosy relationship between Bigelow and Senator Reid. So after all that, here's my personal, oh-so-grumpy perspective. Nepotism or not, at least it's entertaining. Any story that involves bulletproof wolves, billionaire UFO hunters, and secret Pentagon programs is guaranteed to raise eyebrows. The importance of skepticism? With so many contradictory accounts, it's wise to keep a healthy dose of skepticism. We don't want to get fooled by sensational claims or fall for every shiny orb. Remember, there must be over 1 million mylar balloons released across the world every year. There's so many, they cause big problems for animals and power outages. And then media hype. Media hype is a double-edged sword. It puts UFO talk in the mainstream, but it also warps the facts if journalists don't do their homework. Some journalists behave more like activists, and I'm looking at Leslie Kane here. Where there's smoke, there could be fire, or it could be a fog machine. It's not impossible that some unknown phenomenon is happening, but the evidence from Skinwalker Ranch is suspect at best. We can't rule out illusions, hoaxes, misidentifications, or tall tales. In short, if you ask me, it's still a puzzle. Harry Reid and Robert Bigelow's synergy definitely changed the UFO landscape, for better or worse. They fueled investigations that remain controversial, and those investigations help shape how the US government officially talks about UFOs now. So where do we go from here? What's next for Skinwalker Ranch? Harry Reid's legacy and Bigelow's paranormal pursuits? Well, the ranch is under new ownership. Brandon Fugal, another billionaire realtor, heavily guarded, and is the subject of TV shows claiming to explore scientific mysteries. It's a rerun of what Bigelow did, except it's now on the History Channel. And we'll dig into that in a later video. Robert Bigelow continues to dabble in everything from inflatable space tech to studies on consciousness and the afterlife. Harry Reid, he's in the afterlife. He passed away in 2021, but his imprint on UFO and paranormal research remains. Meanwhile, the rest of us are left to guess how much of this was a legitimate pursuit of truth, how much was driven by nepotism or personal obsession, and how much was amplified by the media. The programs known as OSAP, ATIP have dissolved or evolved into other efforts, culminating in more recent Pentagon offices dedicated to unknown aerial phenomena like the UAP task force. Whether you're a believer or a cynic, you can't deny that the world of UFOs has never been the same since those Senate-funded spooky ranch exploits. For me, it's a wild ride. It's taught me two things. Don't underestimate a senator with a UFO passion, and always keep extra silver bullets if a shape-shifting wolf shows up. It's maybe just too fanciful and out there, but it sure lives up to the title of Paranormal Disneyland. That about wraps it up for our special tonight. Our journey through the Harry Reid Bigelow connection, the 22 million contract, and the outlandish carnival that is Skinwalker Ranch. Thanks for sticking around on the Cult of UFO channel. If you made it this far, you clearly love a good UFO yarn. If you found this entertaining or informative, please like, subscribe and ring the bell up there so you don't miss our next exciting instalment. Drop a comment below letting me know if you think Skinwalker Ranch is a real interdimensional playground or just a big fancy desert money pit. And remember, with or without government money, we'll keep digging into these cosmic capers until we get some answers, or at least another great story to tell. Stay curious and watch the skies.